You're welcome back to the Gavel. Now, still on the 2018 budget. Earlier in the program, we listened to the spokespersons of the Senate and the House of Representatives explain their positions on the actions taken by both houses on the 2018 budget. They explained that the adjustments and reductions in the locations, cost, and number of projects approved were made to address geopolitical imbalances that came with the executive proposals. Now, this is in response to the various concerns raised by President Buhari that the National Assembly made cuts to the 2018 budget to the tune of 347 billion naira and also introduced 6,403 projects amounting to 578 billion naira. We interviewed a development expert, Professor Kenife, to get his thoughts on the matter.
The government's budget is only 9.12 trillion compared to a GDP of nearly 120 trillion. So it's very small. It's about 9%. But it is a catalytic instrument because a lot of the private sector engagement in many of the public goods and quite a lot of borrowed money from China, wherever, a lot of it, and development partners' resources require counterparts. A lot of them require counterparts. So the government must be in a position to pay the counterparts or, in fact, appropriate it by the National Assembly to put, for the others to kick in. So if you imagine that the 2.78 trillion that is budgeted for capital expenditure, that is 15% of about 15 trillion. So you can see the leverage. It's a heavy leverage. So, when you delay, first you knock the confidence of investors, and investors are private sector investors mainly, because they don't know. And they don't make their investment decision and wait and wait. And if you wait for 6 months, they'll have to go and review the investment decision. And then that becomes another issue. Second problem is procurement. Whenever you spend your 7 months to do your budget round, then it's 3 months minimum for ministers to procure. Otherwise, they'll be heading to jail. You can't tamper with procurement here. It's so well written that you will walk your way straight into the jail. So on both counts, it knocks the economy.
Now, the president has signed the budget, but while he was signing the budget, he raised some concerns. Specifically, he said that the National Assembly made some changes to the budget, namely that the National Assembly made cuts amounting to 347 billion naira in the allocation to 4,700 projects. What do you think about this concern raised by the president?
Now, let me tell you why. First of all, the president is justified to feel extremely angry about what has happened. And it's very strange. You know why? Because the real duty to run the economy is that of the government. And the government has elaborate instruments that they've negotiated. For example, Economic Recovery and Growth Plan. For 2 years, no development partner wanted to touch Nigeria and said, go and get a plan that we can work with. And so when in 2017, February, we produced the plan, they came down. Now they are now asking us to come out. Everybody's ready to lend money to Nigeria. And then as a result of that plan, it was elaborated. 6 pillars, 60 policy action areas, a lot of indicators, and then locked down in the budget with outputs. Obviously, projects have to be created to deliver those outputs. And I talked to the budget office people, and they have a well-articulated procedure for identifying their projects. And then when you now come, whatever may have happened, about 4,700 of these projects disappeared. Now, you are knocking the whole country because this is a budget of consolidation that should take us out of recession and increase the pace of recovery. So it's not a good thing to do. And why worries me much is they introduced well over 6,000 of their own projects, valued at about 500 and something billion.
78 billion.
Exactly the same amount that they increased the entire budget by. Because they moved the benchmark from $41 or $45 to $51. And then generated over 500 billion. If you had used that 500 billion to fund some of these extras that they brought in, it wouldn't have been as much a big issue as it is now. But you have decimated the proprietary the project that are supposed to deliver a plan that I would believe you were part of, and to replace or whatever you've done. You know. And it's not just knocking them down. You knock them out of shape. Some of them could no longer deliver the outputs because of the level of the cuts. And this is a very, very, very worrisome issue. And I think we've moved into a constitutional crisis as we speak.
Now, before we even get into the issue of the Constitution, the National Assembly had said that, justified these actions, that these projects were not even people-oriented projects. They're not adding value to the lives of Nigerians in the first place. They're high-sounding projects.
Well, they're entitled to their views, but the issue is this. Were you not part of the development of the plan, the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan? Were
they part of the plan?
This is the question. Were they not, what was the level of engagement of the Assembly in that process? And then what contribution did you make in formulating some of the projects that actually now came back to you in the Assembly for appropriation? I think I have to say to you, on balance, this Constitution actually expects both parties to work together. Looking at all the many relevant provisions, even the oversight function shows that gives them power to look at the content and context and they have the power. Then the fiscal strategy paper is developed by executive and sent to the Assembly well in advance, about 2-3 months in advance, for them to eschew what is coming. They send the medium-term expenditure framework document, which is like a rolling plan, to also see what is coming. And they buy into this by approving it. But then, in between that and when the draft budget arrives, are major contentions. The contentions I see from the Assembly is, wait a minute, we are the custodians of the needs of the people. When you involve us, you are not involving us because we are in Abuja, you are involving us because we represent the people. So we have reached out to the people and responded to their needs by developing projects that are answerable or responsive to their needs. And we wanted to import them into the budget frame. But the question is, why don't you bring them into the system so that we follow one quality framework, one quality standard framework developed by the executive to validate these projects, rank them, and get them into the draft budget.
And Professor Ken, this has always been an issue where, we've talked about it, analysts have talked about it, that especially in this context, we have the National Assembly dominated by the ruling party, APC. The government in power is APC. One would expect that since they're all from the same political party, there should be some level of engagement. These discussions should have been held before, in preparation of the budget, before the budget is being prepared. And it appears that both arms of government appears to be working at cross purposes.
No, I have to tell you something. Forget about the political parties. The Assembly itself is asserting its independence. They have made it very clear they don't want to be a rubber stamp. And we have to respect that. They don't want you to bring them something and tell them to rubber stamp. They've even made it clear from the way they elected their officers. They don't want any interference, because we've had it. In the time of Obasanjo, we had brutal situations where Senate president, one after another, got thrown out of the house, many times. But anyway, so they don't want to be a rubber stamp. So in terms of their, and that's why I've written to all the presidents in the last 2 presidents. I wrote to Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, I wrote to the president, Jonathan, and the vice president. I also wrote to President Buhari and the vice president, and there's copied the Senate, asking them to please, this is 6 years ago. From 6 years ago, I've been writing to them, saying to them, this is going to become a major constitutional crisis. If you don't go to the Supreme Court to give you an interpretation of who has what power and what are the limits of the powers by who, so that this will move forward.
We've seen the Federal High Court
and now
even
it's
ruling.
A good crisis right
the Federal High Court has actually ruled that the National Assembly has powers to increase the budget.
Well, I would say, fair enough, but increasing budget, what are you increasing? The absolute quantum of the budget. It doesn't answer the question about introducing new item into the budget. It doesn't answer the question of cannibalizing, I would use the word, I'm sorry, deconstructing the entire budget and then removing items and cutting down items. You can increase it by increasing the benchmark. Finish. You increase the benchmark from 45 to 51, send it back to the executive, do something about it. They've increased the budget. But then there are more actions that have to be tested in law. And I think that decision has to come from Supreme Court. It's the Supreme Court that's the only authority that interprets the Constitution. And this is a serious constitutional crisis.
But there appears to be a reluctance, of even the executive going to the Supreme Court to see, an interpretation of this matter.
Yeah, you see, when you look at the statements from the president, I really feel for him because he laid it out in very clear terms. And I think I would expect the vice president being, we're so lucky to have a legal luminary as our vice president. And he needs to take this matter and sort it out for legacy. We really need to clear this matter. The thing is, let me tell you how Assembly feels. Assembly feels that they are responsible for a bottom-up approach based on needs of the community. The executive is simply doing a top-down approach, budgetary approach. The only thing they try to do in terms of participatory budgeting is to come and say to them, approve my budget. But they understand coming to us is coming to us to go back to our constituency who we represent. So they're actually on two ends of the spectrum.
Yes.
And they now provide their own evidence to the fact that if they keep quiet, it will be a disservice to the country. That when the budgets come and they look at it and put it under scrutiny, they find a lopsided budget from a ministry only addressing one or two geopolitical zones. And they have their case. But the issue is that who is actually governing the country? Now, you cannot have two governments where we have an unknown procedure and quality framework that the Assembly uses to judge and create their projects. Some of them are not well developed and articulated, and then you put them and shoot them into the budgetary frame.
Now, this is where we draw the curtains on this week's edition of Gavel. If you have any opinions on any of the issues discussed, please email us on thegavel@channelstv.com. Thank you for staying with us, and see you again next week.